Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode, I take a look at the 2011 film In Time with Justin Timberlake and Amanda Seyfried and some rather forgettable performances by others. It has a 37% on the tomato meter and a 51% on the audience score. Well, that's a 51%, making it rotten, and I'm a little conflicted on this because I saw this film when it came out in 2011. I saw it when it came out on DVD. And, I actually enjoyed it. I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't consider it bad. I watched it straight through. I was entertained the whole way. And I would have told you back then that this was just fine. And if I had seen this in the movie theater, I would have been satisfied and I would have enjoyed my popcorn and my drink. And I would have told other people, yeah, the movie was great. I wouldn't have said it was, the best thing ever, but I would have said it was good enough to watch. Now, I watched it again, and wow, and in fact, the second time I watched this was about 2 years out from there. I would say it was like 2013 on my second viewing, and I've watched it recently, about a week ago, and on the second viewing, it got a lot worse, and I could see the problems with it, and it wasn't nearly as entertaining the second time around. And I think that, it was a film that you could enjoy one time if you don't think too much about it, but on that second viewing, you're going to be thinking about some problems in the story. And, certainly on my third viewing, which is much more recently, as of a week ago, yeah, this thing it really is rotten. And, I don't want to say it's rotten because it served its purpose. In 2011, I enjoyed it, and so if I had paid money to see it in 2011, I would have said, "Hey, this is fine." But here I am trying to find out why it has a 51% audience score, and I would say I largely agree with that 51% audience score, and I would have to actually lower that a bit and say it's more fair if it were closer to the critics, if it were closer to around 40% audience score. It's just got too many logical flaws, too many convenient things that happen that work one way when it's convenient and then work a different way when it's convenient at a different point in the plot. And you see this on the second or third viewing, and it's, maybe some people saw it on the first viewing. I doubt it. I think this was financially successful, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. My thought is that it was a success at the time. Justin Timberlake is not known as some fantastic actor. He's, of course, a singer. I enjoy his singing. I'm not a fan of his boy band stuff, but his later work on his own, I like. As an actor, I think he's okay. I thought his performance in The Social Network was just fine. It was almost a perfect casting for the character. Here, he just does a good job. He could be replaced with anybody else, but I don't find a fault with his acting. Now, Amanda Seyfried, this isn't her best. It's not her worst either. It's forgettable, and she is very interesting to look at when she's in her various fake wigs, which they're obviously fake wigs that she's wearing. Otherwise, there's nothing outstanding about her at all. If there is cheesy dialogue, of which there is a little bit of cheesy dialogue, it's not the actor's fault. This is whoever wrote the script, so I'm not going to say this had bad acting. There are other actors in this that do, forgettable, not good or bad roles, like Olivia Wilde, for example. But they have minor roles they're dispatched with quickly in the plot, except for the cop played by, I believe his name is Cillian. I've seen him in other sci-fi stuff. He does a good job as a kind of a bad guy type cop character. Anyway, to move on straight into the audience reviews, because, I want to find out why it might be 51%, why it might be higher than I think it should have on the audience score. We can get right into a November 30th of 2019 review, meaning that this has got recent reviews, and this isn't a forgotten about movie at all. We have a 4.5-star review. Excellent premise, well executed action thriller. Yes, themes are obvious, but it's definitely enjoyable. I would say no, this is probably a 2-star movie at its peak. I would give it 2 stars because it worked for me on the first viewing. I'm not going to say, on my third viewing, it's so rotten that I'm going to give it 1 star. I don't think that's fair. For what it did, it's 2 stars. Good enough on the first viewing, but nothing to write home about and rave about. So Let's move down. November of 2019, 5 stars. This movie is intense. It makes you realize how golden time is. It also shows how crooked the system is. It's a masterpiece that many, including Rotten Tomatoes, wouldn't understand. Totally recommended. Well, the theme is great. The theme is like been done a million times before. In this movie, time is a currency, and it's kind of a statement on how society is. It's controlled by a handful of rich people, rich in time instead of in money, and they are basically detached and uncaring for the rest of everybody else. We've seen this done in a million stories since the beginning of time, since cavemen probably started writing their stories on the walls of the cave. Nothing new to see here. It's not a bad theme. It's just in this movie, it's just, we've seen it before. The twist, of course, is that time is the currency. It's displayed on your arm how much time you have left. You don't age past 25. You start out with 25 years worth of time, and then it's up to you to work or hustle or do whatever you have to do to keep the clock running. Otherwise, you just drop dead, like somebody pulled the plug on you when your time runs out. Now, the only thing that's really bad in this, logic-wise, from that aspect of time as currency, is that in this movie it shows that the method for transferring time from one person to another, the method of even stealing time from one person to another, even taking time against someone's will, doing it while they're asleep. This is very easy to accomplish. In fact, it's much easier to steal time from people in this than it is to steal somebody's wallet. And that's just a bad premise. That just doesn't logically work. That's not the way society organizes its currency system. So yes, you can have time as currency, but making it so easy to display to other people and making it so easy to steal and to even rob people in their sleep of this time. It's just, no, I'm sorry. It's just not a system that we would logically come up with. If they had shown a system using time that it wasn't, something literally on your sleeve and easy for other people to just literally steal from you by strong-arming you literally, it would be more believable. But that's the one thing that's just not working for me in this. And it kind of, I hand-waved it away. I hand-waved that logic away, that illogical way, when I saw this for the first time, and I'm just not willing to hand wave that away on the second viewing, the third viewing, and it's just a real problem in the logic of this. I can see how some people would just automatically pan this as rotten as soon as they find out that big logical problem, even on the first viewing. So let's move down. October 2019, half a star. It's pure rubbish. The script makes no sense whatsoever. The characters are hateful, and you simply don't care what happens to them. Yeah, the characters, like, they're kind of cliched characters. We've seen these type of characters a million times before. It's got really cliched love story in which, a poor boy, he makes his way into the rich person's world, and, the kind of disaffected daughter of a rich person suddenly falls in love with him and runs off with him, and it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome where he kidnaps the rich daughter and she falls in love with him within just a few minutes of the film to get back at her daddy. And we've seen all this cliched stuff so many times before, so I'm not going to make this into a big critique on the characters. Let's just say they're cardboard and cliched. That's not the biggest part of this, though. The biggest problem part of this, I would say the biggest problem part of this is more illogic in the plot. For example, the poor and the middle class and the rich are separated from each other in this film by means of checkpoints that you have to pass through, and you have to use your time currency to get through these checkpoints. Okay, fine. But in one part of the movie, the checkpoints are not easy to get through, and there's a lot of checkpoints between the poor areas and the rich areas, and you have to go through several of these checkpoints to get, from the poorest to the richest zones. And yet later in the movie, when it's convenient, you can just breeze through the checkpoints like they don't even exist if you just need it to work. For the plot just needs that to happen really quick, and that's more illogical stuff on top of the basic illogic in the time mechanism itself, and it just thoroughly makes this movie rotten. Now again, I kind of noticed this on the first viewing, but it just went past me because I was swept up in enough of the rest of the film. On a second viewing, that stood out right away, that the checkpoints don't make any sense. They only work when the plot needs them to work. So yeah, it's definitely rotten because of that type of logic. 3.5 stars. Concept was cool. Ending sucked. Yeah, the movie didn't know if it wanted to be, what it wanted to do, where it wanted to go. It showed the main character wanting to get revenge for the death of his mother, that he felt that the system was unfair and it caused the death of his mother, and so he wanted revenge. But then he goes to get his revenge and he gets sidetracked into gambling in a casino and doing all this other stuff, and it's like the movie just forgot about his motivations and it changed his motivations on the fly. And the movie didn't even know where it wanted to end. And so the ending didn't really give us anything because it didn't know what kind of ending it was headed towards. You couldn't tell what kind of ending it was headed towards. The first time I watched it, I just found it boring how it ended. The second time I watched it, I found that it was obvious it didn't know how, somebody that was writing it didn't know how they wanted to end it. And it gets worse with every viewing, I would suppose. 5 stars, September of 2019. My rating, 10 out of 10 out of 10. No spoilers. Different and creative story of economy and human life and immortality system. Interesting story. I have seen most of the sci-fi movies and TV series, but this one is different and worth watching. I loved the film. Must watch for sci-fi lovers. Best regards. Yeah, I think if you watch this one time and never gave it much thought, then it worked for you. 5 stars though, no. Maybe you would say it was 3 stars if it worked for you the first time. That's what I would have said back in the day. But no, 5 stars, you're out to lunch on this one. I just can't accept that. Half a star, August of 2019. The movie doesn't explain what happens if characters starve or get shot. Continuity suffers from time to time. Overall, I don't recommend you watch this movie. Yeah, the movie is so concerned about the device of your time running out that it doesn't even attempt to go into, well, what happens if you don't eat and you starve to death, or what happens if you get shot, because nobody actually gets shot outright in a way that you would be shown where their time would go. Does their time just turn off or get erased? And since we're dealing with a currency system using time, well, how much of this time is in circulation, so to speak? And if you, let's say you have 50 years of time banked up in your arm on your life clock, if somebody were to shoot you, where does this time go? Does it go back into the overall pool that's available in the economy? Or by killing people, can you simply, increase the value of the currency, so to speak, by just killing people? The movie doesn't even attempt to ask that question, much less answer it, and that's a big flaw. Once you see it the second or third time, it's more illogical stuff that it just doesn't work. We're talking about an economy, and we know about inflation and deflation. Well, it's the same concept with time, right? So the movie doesn't even attempt to ask these questions. So most sci-fi, it's good sci-fi because it will attempt to, if it can't answer the question properly, fine. But good sci-fi stories actually ask these questions. They pose the questions in the first place, and this one doesn't even pose the question. It glosses right on over that. It's just focused on, keeping the action moving no matter what. 3.5 stars. Well, I liked this runaway couple. Yeah, it turns into that. This becomes like a character that wants to get revenge. He wants to destroy the system. He wants to get revenge on the rich people to avenge his mom. And then it derails into a Bonnie and Clyde type thing where they're stealing time from time banks and etc. And it has nothing to do. The character just totally forgets about his mom, like she never existed. And as an audience member watching it the first time, so do you, because they keep the action going. And all the illogical parts of it kind of go over your head because you're just along for this ride. And maybe that's the secret of this. Maybe that's the secret of the movie, why I liked it the first time around, because it keeps the pace up. It's not one where you can say it drags and the pace was bad. It keeps the pace up, and it dispenses with everything else to keep that pace up. And that makes this worth a watch one time, and then the second time you're going to totally flip around and call this thing rotten. 3.5 stars. I really like this movie even when it goes off the rails. Yeah, it goes off the rails, but it does it in an action type way. Even though it's set in only in an industrial area of Los Angeles and the storm drain system of Los Angeles, we've seen all these locations a million times over in so many Hollywood movies, so many TV shows. They're very familiar to us. The whole movie is set around that. If you've seen like people drive cars through the storm basin system and under the bridges and over the bridges of that system in Los Angeles, then you've seen all the sets before a million times. It's just like this goes over your head and it's forgivable because the pace is always up there. So you just kind of overlook all this on the first watch. But the second watch, yeah, you'll just say, wow, this must have been low budget because it never leaves that storm drain system, or at least it appears to never leave it. 3 stars. The idea for this film is wonderful, but the plot and the consequence realization are a little less, also because for most of the time you do not understand what the intentions of the protagonist belonging. Yeah, bad English here on this review, but they're getting to the point that I made. You don't understand, like you're shown, the motivation of the character, the protagonist, Justin Timberlake's character. He wants to get revenge for his mom. But the movie forgets all about that, and then you're in a Bonnie and Clyde type thing, Robin Hood type thing. Ridiculous. On the second viewing, ridiculous. 3 stars. A very cool concept. I think Justin Timberlake did a good enough job. Some parts of the movie don't make sense, such as the technology that holds time. Even the fact that how people knew how to make such technology, it drags on at times, but the concept is what sells it. No, not 3 stars. Peaks at 2. And again, they're bringing up a good point too. There's no backstory on how society got to this point, on what kind of technology is involved in making people immortal and then deciding that you should make currency time. Yeah, it's a cool concept on the surface, but they don't attempt to flesh it out, ask any questions about it, give you any backstory or history on it. There's just a little very brief exposition at the beginning that says, well, everybody's immortal and they get 25 years and then you're off on your own. That's it. That's all you get. The characters don't even ask how all this started. Even when the movie goes into a Robin Hood like Bonnie Clyde type story, nobody at any point ever asks how they got to that point or how they can get out of it. They just want to get even with the man, so to speak. But there's no attempt to actually ask, well, how do we get to this point? The movie never brings that up. 1.5 stars. Okay, so I watched this in class and absolutely hated it. I'm wondering what kind of class that was. I hope your teacher wasn't using this as some kind of teaching tool, but I have a bad feeling they were. Let's continue. The concept was interesting, but I don't think they executed it well enough. The pacing was too fast and the plot lines were all over the place. Some information was just randomly thrown in for no reason, unless they did have a reason but didn't have time to execute it well. But the main reason I'm mad is really just the fact that the 2 main characters did not acknowledge that inflation exists and put a million years into the market. Yeah, like I said, the movie doesn't attempt to even ask questions about how the economy functions. It does show you a lot in the movie about how people, everything they buy has to be bought with the time. They have to buy a cup of coffee and, they're complaining that the cup of coffee went up from 6 hours to 7 hours in price. That's a cool concept, but they never once attempt to explain how that works underneath or how they got there or inflation, deflation. Nope. I'm sorry. The movie, it does keep a fast pace. It doesn't want to slow the pace down to try to answer or ask any of those questions. So breezes right on by that. 5 stars. Actually really enjoyed the movie. Good actors and the storyline is surprisingly very interesting. Well, yeah, if it's your only first time viewing and you moved on quick and didn't ask any questions, I can see that, but not 5 stars. Not 5 stars. 1 star. A cool concept that unfortunately was not put together very well. Just ends up being a Bonnie and Clyde of time story. Yeah, it turns into that and a little bit Robin Hood, and doesn't really deliver any message there either. Just that they needed to keep the pace moving, and that's where they took it. 4.5 stars. Really good sci-fi concept based on the idea that time, as in lifespan, is literally money. Pretty good acting, especially a harrowing death scene, right up till the unfortunately stupid ending, which doesn't actually solve the problem of socio-economic equality that it purports to. Well, yeah, it derails into that like a Robin Hood, a Bonnie and Clyde type thing, but there's no payoff to that. You're right. The ending just doesn't give you anything along those lines. They just did that to keep the pace up, and it worked. That's why I enjoyed it the first time. But there's nothing to be found under the surface. They don't attempt to give you any theme to that. This level of pace in this movie, let's just say it's too fast to have a theme. It's just about the pace. 5 stars. Again, 5 stars. February of 2019. A great movie with incredible relevance to out modern system of cruel banksters. A surprisingly good performance from Justin Timberlake. Yeah, his performance was okay. He's a better singer, right? But no, he's not bad. There was just no point to this. The flaw in this movie was not Justin Timberlake. The flaw was a lot of other stuff. He wasn't the flaw here. 3.5 stars, December of 2018. Not a Justin Timberlake fan at all, but a pretty good movie. Okay on first viewing, maybe. 2.5 stars, November 2018. Strengths. The concept behind this film is a really good one. That's basically the go-to positive that people found in this movie. Part of making the concept work were some of the ideas used in the film, gambling with time, using it to access higher-end locations, and the use of the Minutemen characters were all examples of this. Justin Timberlake is solid as the lead, while Matt Bomer gives a strong supporting performance in his limited role. Yeah, the concept was what sold the movie. It kept the pace up. It kept the pace up. It didn't ask questions about the logic going on there. And if you saw it the first time, it all worked. However, the thing about Justin Timberlake. I don't know why I want to say Timberlake. Justin Timberlake. It's not a strong performance. It's just a passable performance. The gambling part was weird. It doesn't make a lot of sense. The first thing he wants to do to supposedly get his revenge on the rich is to go gambling. First of all, nothing in the film is shown or set up that he's good at gambling, that he's good at playing poker or any other card games. Yet all of a sudden he's sitting there with rich people at a high-stakes poker game table gambling with all the time he has, hundreds of years worth. Great, but none of this is set up. He's just a low-level factory worker type. Why does he suddenly have this James Bond-esque Casino Royale gambling demeanor going on with skills? None of that is set up, so it's illogical, but we'll move on. 1.5 stars. About the only praise In Time received from reviewers was for the originality of its premise. Yes, I'll agree with that. I might have thought the same, except that I had already seen The Price of Life, an obscure 1987 made-for-TV film that supplied not only the premise, but also all of the plot elements of In Time that had been praised as original. Well, that's new. Thank you for bringing that up. So I guess this whole thing was stolen from a 1987 made-for-TV film. Okay, that's very interesting. I'm thinking that probably that wouldn't have been original either, and that this probably has been done in short stories and whatnot long ago. But let's move on. Everything else that happened in the film was typical hackneyed Hollywood trope. The copying from The Price of Life was so obvious and so pervasive in the first half. Yeah, look into that, I guess. I'll take their word for it. I would have thought that this concept was just stolen from short stories and other novels and whatnot, but I would believe that Hollywood stole this from a 1987 made-for-TV film. That doesn't seem unbelievable at all. October of 2018, 3.5 stars. Yes, I liked this, but I think it could have been better. Everyone acted well, especially Justin Timberlake, who was great. Loved the concept and the original idea for this movie. Just that damn timekeeper chase dominated the whole movie. Cillian Murphy, fresh from boot polish hairdo, just got on my nerves. Yet the more interesting Minutemen didn't last long. Very early role for the up-and-coming Bella Heathcote. Amanda Seyfried's eyes are a little too big for her face. She looks like a cute cat, particularly in that wig. Yeah, she's in a lot of wigs. I don't know why, because she has real hair. I'm not sure what the thing with the wig stuff was. Maybe she was also working on another project and they couldn't mess with her hair. I don't know. In any case, Cillian Murphy, yeah, he did a good job. He played a timekeeper. There are these cops that are basically like keepers of time that keep people from robbing, from they're like kind of the Secret Service agents that we have for the US dollar. They're the same role for time, the minutes that people have. It's a workable idea, and yeah, there's a lot of tension there because Cillian Murphy's cop or timekeeper character, they just for some reason pay him his allotment of time just barely in the nick of time, and I don't know why that's a good idea to have your cops just like always minutes from death. I don't know if that's to keep them on their toes or whatever, but it's it's a very strange idea in the movie. It's more logic or illogic that the movie never even asks about or attempts to explain in any way. 4 stars. I saw this when I had my first ever economics class at college. It was heavy on that theme. I liked it. Okay, so maybe this explains a previous reviewer saying that he saw it in class. Is this film actually a teaching tool for economics in some way? I don't see that because it doesn't even attempt to ask the questions behind the economics of how this system works. Maybe it's brought up in the regards of it's a bad take on economics. I don't know. Again, it's too many minutes to waste in class just for a teacher to explain how it's bad economics. There are easier ways to teach this, so I don't get it. I don't think this should be used as a teaching tool, pro or con, for economics. I think it's the wrong tool to be using. 3.5 stars, September of 2018. Sci-fi in all its splendor. Great concept, great delivery. Oh, well, it would be sci-fi. It would be sci-fi in its splendor if it actually asked the questions that are obvious to be asked, but it does not ask those questions, let alone attempt to answer them. So actually, it's just sci-fi on the very cardboard level surface, like a comic book sci-fi. Very surface level. 1 star. This movie's first act would work as an effective short film, but the film took a drastic drop in quality after that. The film is basically communist propaganda and advocates for the redistribution of wealth, but has no understanding of the systematic problems and just thinks getting more money can fix society. The movie lacks any focus in the narrative. Well, I'll disagree. I don't think that was the point of the movie. I think that's what the characters in the movie actually got out of it. I think that the 2 main characters of the movie had some weird socialist, communist-leaning belief system in their heads, but I thought that the movie wasn't attempting to give that message. I thought that was just showing the ignorance of the characters, that, you know, the rich girl, you know, she's supposed to be from the upper crust of human society, and she's supposed to be very educated, and all her peers and family members, right? And yet she's the one that's the most willing to go along with the Bonnie and Clyde redistribution of wealth scheme. You know, that actually fits in the real world. If you look at the socialists and communists of American society today, you will overwhelmingly find them among kids of the upper crust, kids of people whose you would think they would be better educated than this. But that's what you see. It is the upper class people in our society that their kids, their resentful of their parents, they're so eager to embrace the communism they find in college professors out there. That's what I got from this movie, but that's the opposite of what this reviewer is suggesting. This reviewer is suggesting that's the intent of the movie. No, I think that's what the characters in the movie believed. But anyway, let's move on. It's kind of a sidetrack. 2.5 stars. Unfortunately, a waste of both time and an intriguing premise. What starts off promisingly enough is spoiled by an all-around air of pinchbeck laziness, transforming what could have been a provocative allegory for the exploitive cruelties of capitalism and inequality into a second-rate rote exercise in sci-fi tropes. Everything here feels half-cocked, from the groan-worthy, unsettled screenplay to the unimaginative production design to the formulaic Bonnie and Clyde adventure. Really, it's a shame. Yeah, I'll largely agree with that. This could have been made into some kind of, statement about capitalism or against capitalism, but that's not what it did. It did everything else this reviewer described. Everything else it described. This is an accurate review, and yet it says it's 2.5 stars. No, it's giving it too much credit. It's 2 stars. It's a 2-star movie. 3.5 stars. This is some of the movies I remember watching back when I was little. Okay, so Clearly a millennial that gave it a lot of credit because they probably didn't put a lot of thought into it as a little kid. I'll agree with that. 5 stars, one of the best movies I've ever seen. I'm sorry, maybe if you're 8 or 9, then I might agree. Otherwise, I can't take that serious. 3 stars, certainly not the greatest movie in the dystopian genre, nor in the Robin Hood type movie, but it's still entertaining and confronting enough to be good. The actors perform adequately, and the visuals are understated enough to seem near future enough. A decent watch. You're giving this way too much credit. You can set any movie in the actual Storm Channel system of Los Angeles. It doesn't make it like avant-garde because you put it there. Every other movie since the beginning of Los Angeles has put their stuff in there too, including every TV show. Next, you're going to be telling me that the old A-Team TV show from the 1980s was avant-garde cinema because they had chases in the Storm Channel system of Los Angeles. Please, nothing new to see there. 4 stars. April of 2018. I like this movie. That is our reality. It is for people who like to think behind the strophe. Time, that is the price we all pay for everything. That is the main resource of our life. Teens need to see this type of idea and review the way they waste their main resource. I would say it is an important idea to think about for those who still didn't realize it. So maybe this reviewer is saying this would be a good teaching tool for teenagers wasting their lives playing video games. I somehow doubt that because they would probably, as a teenager, just find this a cool action flick and everything else would be lost on them, believe me. Half a star. I had expectations, and after 20 minutes, I assumed the script was shit. Unluckily, I watched until the end. Well, yeah, despite the bad English there, I'll say the pace of the movie will keep you watching because it's designed like that. Even if you realize it's crap, you just keep going because the pacing works. I mean, this would be a teaching tool for filmmaking in that if you can keep the pace up, you can keep the audience in the seat. Yet, don't forget, you can't just dispense with everything else, otherwise you end up with a rotten film, so there's like a balancing act there. 4 stars. It is a good story, not a masterpiece, but still good entertainment. Again, yes on the first watch, and I say 2 stars on the first watch. Let me recap. 37% on the tomato meter, 51% on the audience score. We have 69,373 audience or user ratings. That's pretty impressive, making this still relevant. I think 40% on the audience score is fair. Still rotten. It's not going to get better or worse. It'll probably hold here. No economics lesson to be found here. It doesn't even ask that. And I say this isn't actually properly sci-fi beyond the opening premise because it doesn't attempt to ask any question about that opening premise. And so largely In Time is a waste of time, and I will see you on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.